My girlfriend leaned over to her friends and said I was her little bitch. Her words hit me before I could even breathe. The room seemed to contract around me, the air thinning until I could feel nothing but the sting spreading across my chest, sharp and humiliating. I didn't turn around. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there in the doorway, holding the mug I'd brought her, the heat searing into my palm while something colder settled inside me. A faint laugh rose from the group. Another voice chimed in, amused, cruel in the way young people sometimes are when they think the world owes them comfort. I heard her agreeing. I heard her tone, light, careless, dripping with a confidence built on the assumption that I would always obey. My hand trembled against the mug. It was only a small movement, barely noticeable, but I felt it like a fault line cracking. Her alarm buzzed from across the room, a shrill sound cutting through the apartment. She didn't move to silence it. "I'm not even worried about tomorrow," she said. "He'll wake me up. He always does." The words scraped something raw inside me. I swallowed hard. The ceramic in my hand felt heavier. When her friends finally left, she didn't even look at me. She brushed past, her perfume lingering in a soft trail behind her. "Dishwasher's full," she muttered. "Fix it before bed." Then she closed the bathroom door, humming, unaware that the line between us had shifted. I stared at the chair she'd been sitting in. One of her hair ties lay beside it, pink, stretched out from overuse. For a moment, I reached down to pick it up out of habit. My fingers hovered above it, then pulled back. I set the mug on the counter instead. My breath came out unsteady. I went to bed without turning off the hallway light. She hated that, but I needed a sliver of brightness, something to keep the dark from sinking into me completely. When she slid into bed hours later, she didn't say goodnight. She didn't say anything at all. I lay awake longer than I meant to, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, thinking about how easily she had twisted me into a version of myself I barely recognized, a helper, a convenience, someone who softened the edges of her life so she could laugh about how she never lifted a finger. In the morning, her alarm went off again, loud, insistent. It pulsed against the walls like a warning signal. I kept my eyes closed. She groaned, slapped the screen blindly, and rolled back into the blankets. I could feel the shift of the mattress as she drifted right back to sleep, just like always, just not today. For a moment, my instinct kicked in, the old reflex, to get up, to shake her shoulder gently, to pull the curtains open, to start the day for her. The urge tugged at me like an old habit that hadn't yet learned it was dead. But something in me stayed still, a quiet, heavy stillness, like the moment before a storm breaks. Her breathing settled into its usual slow pattern. The morning light filtered in, pale and cold, brushing the edge of the blanket where her hand had fallen. I watched the light creep across the floorboards. I listened to the faint ringing in my ears. I waited. When she finally woke up on her own, it was abrupt, panicked, sharp, frantic. Her feet hit the floor, her breath short and angry. "Why didn't you wake me?" she yelled. "You know I had an exam. Are you stupid? You just cost me everything." I sat up slowly, the sheets rustling. My throat tightened, but I managed to speak. "I heard what you said last night." She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see something flicker in her eyes. Then it shifted into annoyance, dismissal. "Oh my God, you're being dramatic. You really are a bitch." The word landed harder this time, colder, as if she knew exactly where to strike. I stood, steadying myself on the edge of the bed. There was a moment, small, quiet, where I thought she might soften, might realize I wasn't just her convenience, but she crossed her arms instead, jaw set, waiting for me to apologize. I didn't. Instead, I walked past her, past the anger radiating off her, past the life I'd been shrinking inside without noticing. My hand brushed the wall as I moved down the hallway. Her voice followed me, sharp, rising, furious. But the sound grew distant with each step, because for the first time, I wasn't responding to it, or to her, and she felt the slip of control so clearly that she shouted my name like it could pull me back into place. But I kept walking. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know what I would tell her after my shift. But as I reached for the door, I realized something simple and devastating. I wasn't scared of losing her. I was scared of losing myself if I stayed. The thought sat with me, heavy and unfamiliar, as her voice rose again behind me. This time louder, sharper, a crack in the air that hinted at the storm still gathering. And I knew we hadn't even reached the worst of it yet. "She really didn't wake me up," she hissed into the phone. "My little bitch finally decided to grow a spine." By the time I reached the back door of the cafe where I work, her voice was leaking straight through the metal. The morning air was still gray, streetlights flickering out one by one, and she was pacing by the dumpster with her phone pressed to her ear. Eyeliner smudged, hair in a messy bun like the world had personally wronged her. I stopped just short of the doorway, my hand on the handle, unseen. "She ruined my exam," she said. "No, I was up late, whatever, but he—" She caught herself and laughed, correcting without thinking. "She always wakes me up, that's the deal. I don't do mornings. Now I've got a 0 because my housemaid decided to get sensitive." The word landed harder than the cold metal on my palm. I felt the muscles in my fingers tighten around the handle, the edge digging into my skin. A delivery truck rumbled past, thudding over a pothole. She didn't notice. She was too busy painting me as the villain to someone on the other end. "No, I'm not apologizing," she said. "If anything, she owes me. I've carried this relationship on my back, rent, groceries, everything. She should be grateful I even let her sleep in my bed." That part was a lie, and we both knew it. My paycheck hit the account before hers most weeks. I'd paid more than half the rent for months now, but truth didn't matter in that moment, only performance. The back door swung open from the inside. Liam, one of the line cooks, nearly walked into me. He stopped short when he saw her, then glanced at me with a quick, confused frown. We're already behind on prep," he muttered. "I'm coming," I said, my voice low. She finally noticed me then. Her gaze slid right over my apron, my tired face, and latched onto the clock above the door. "Look at the time," she said into the phone, then rolled her eyes dramatically. "She's here. Gotta go yell at her." She hung up without saying goodbye. "You didn't wake me up," she snapped, stepping toward me. "You knew I had that exam. What kind of partner are you?" I could smell stale coffee and the faint sweetness of spilled syrup on her hoodie. "You called me your little bitch to your friends," I said quietly. "Last night." She blinked, then scoffed, like I'd accused her of misplacing a spoon. "Oh my God, you're still on that? It was a joke." "Are you seriously going to ruin my future over a joke?" Liam shifted behind me. The delivery guy rolled a crate through the door, forcing us to step aside. She lowered her voice, but not enough. "You know you're the one who needs me, right?" she said. "You can't handle living alone. You can't even sleep without someone next to you. Don't start acting brand new." For a moment, I didn't know where exactly to place my hands. On my hips? Folded? Hanging uselessly at my sides? I ended up clutching my apron strings, my knuckles pale where they twisted the fabric. "I have to clock in," I said. "Yeah, run along," she muttered. "Since you like sleeping so much, at least be useful while you're awake." I brushed past her into the fluorescent brightness of the prep area. The air inside was thick with the smell of onions and bleach. Harsh white light flattened everything, made every stain on stainless steel unforgiving. That kind of light doesn't leave room for tenderness, it only exposes what's already raw. "Everything okay?" Maria, the morning supervisor, asked as I tied on my gloves. She was in her 50s, eyes permanently lined like she'd laughed and worried in equal measure for decades. "I'm fine," I said. The lie scratched my throat on the way out. She didn't push, but I saw the way her eyes flicked toward the back door, then back to me. That small, silent acknowledgement felt like someone placing a hand just close enough to catch me if I fell. Not touching, but there, The rush hit hard at 8. Orders stacked on the screen, toast popping up, eggs hissing on the griddle. I moved on autopilot, plating, wiping, calling out tickets. Between the tickets and the clatter, my phone buzzed relentlessly inside my locker. Short bursts, long vibrations. I ignored them. On my first break, I finally opened the locker. The screen lit up with more notifications than I had expected. Missed calls, voice messages, a string of texts that bled into one another. You seriously didn't wake me up? You made me fail. I hope you're happy with yourself. You're useless. Pick up the phone. Answer me. Don't you dare ignore me. The last one was a voice message. My thumb hovered over it. I glanced around the break room, 2 baristas arguing softly over milk inventory, someone scrolling through their own phone with earbuds in. I pressed play with the volume low. Her voice poured out, sharp, fast, breathy with rage. "I can't believe you," she said. "You're supposed to be the reliable one. That's why this works. I'm fun, you're stable. If you start acting like this, what exactly are you good for? Seriously, you better fix this. I swear, you are such a—" I hit pause before the last word came, but it hung there anyway, heavy and familiar. I swallowed. The room hummed with the sound of the soda fridge. For a few seconds, everything felt muffled, like my head was underwater. Then Maria appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Your table 4 needs their check adjusted," she said. Her eyes flicked to my phone, then my face. "You can do that after your break. Eat something first." I nodded, even though my stomach was a tight knot. When I stepped back onto the floor, she was there. She'd taken a seat at the counter, still in her hoodie and leggings, hair scraped back tighter now. No makeup touch-ups. No effort to look put together, just raw irritation, cracking through everything. "You're really not going to apologize?" she asked as soon as I came within earshot. The customers at the counter went quiet in that way people do when they pretend not to listen. "I'm working," I said. "Can we talk later?" "Apparently, I can't trust you to do anything later," she shot back. "So no, we can talk now." A guy stirring his coffee glanced up and then quickly looked down again. I could feel their eyes, all of them, pressing against my skin. She slid off the stool and moved closer, dropping her voice just enough to claim privacy while still being heard. "You had one job," she said. "One. You know I don't wake up to alarms. You know that, and you just— What? Decided to teach me a lesson? Who do you think you are?" My tongue felt heavy. Words crowded behind it, all the small ways I'd adjusted my life around hers. But saying them out loud here, under this harsh light, with the smell of burnt toast in the air and strangers pretending they weren't listening, it felt impossible. Maria stepped in, slow but steady. "Ma'am," she said, her tone professional but firm, "if you're not ordering, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the service area." "I'm talking to my girlfriend," she snapped. "On my clock," I said quietly. For a second, our eyes locked. There was a thin, dangerous silence there, stretching like a wire pulled too tight. The kind of silence where you realize something has already broken, even if neither of you has named it yet. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll wait." She backed away, not out the door, but to a corner table by the window. She sat with her arms folded, staring at me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Her phone sat face down on the table, screen lighting up now and then with notifications, each glow punched at my peripheral vision. By the time my shift ended, the winter light outside had turned sharp and colorless. I untied my apron with fingers that didn't feel entirely like mine. Maria caught my elbow as I passed. "Do you want me to walk you out?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't completely false either. Something inside me had shifted from shaking to still. Outside, the air bit at my cheeks. She was waiting by the bus stop, hood up now. She didn't bother with a greeting. "You know you made me miss the deadline to reschedule," she said. "So that's it. I'm screwed, and it's your fault. You know that, right? Your exam wasn't my responsibility, I said. She laughed once, short and disbelieving. Everything about my life is your responsibility. That's the point. You don't get to decide when to stop being my support. You don't get to choose boundaries all of a sudden. The words sounded dirty in her mouth. My phone buzzed again. Without thinking, I glanced at it. A new notification banner slid down from the top. A screenshot from an unknown number, just the preview. A group chat name I recognized. Her friends. A portion of her last message visible beneath it. Anyway, it read, if she wants to act up, I'll remind her who pays and who obeys. I didn't even have to open it to understand something had crossed a new line. The wind cut through my coat. I tightened it around myself with one hand, the other still holding the phone. The words on the screen burning into me like cold fire. She noticed my expression shift. What? She demanded. Who's that? I looked up at her, then back at the glowing words, feeling the ground tilt just slightly under my feet as my thumb hovered over the notification, ready to open the full message and every ugly sentence waiting behind it. When I was 11, I learned that the difference between eating and going hungry could fit into a cheap vinyl wallet. It was green with the corners cracked and peeling, the metal clasp slightly rusted. My mother kept it in the top drawer by the sink, buried under folded dish towels. Every evening when she came home from the late shift at the hospital cafeteria, she would sit at the kitchen table, open that wallet, and lay out the cash in small, careful stacks. One for rent, she'd murmur, sliding a few bills to the left. One for electricity, one for food, one for bus fare. The last pile was always the smallest. Sometimes it was just coins. I'd lean against the counter, pretending to do homework, but my eyes would keep drifting to her hands. The skin on her knuckles was cracked from dish soap and heat. She never complained. She just counted and recounted until every bill had a place. When she was done, she'd tuck the flattened grocery receipts into a small yellow notepad, writing down each expense in tiny, neat letters. That notepad stayed by the stove, edges curling from the steam and heat. It looked fragile, but it held our whole life in scratched ink and faded numbers. We didn't have much, but we had a system. That was how she survived. How she made sure I had shoes for school and something in my backpack that resembled a lunch. On Sundays, we'd walk 2 blocks to the bus stop, her hand warm around mine. She kept our paper bus passes in a chipped glass jar by the door, each little rectangle of cardstock held together with a rubber band. When one pass was full of hole punches, she'd smooth it out like a keepsake instead of trash. "These are proof we kept going," she'd say with a small smile, even when it was hard. I didn't understand the weight of that sentence back then. I just liked the sound of the bus doors hissing open and the lurch in my stomach when it pulled away from the curb. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The machines downstairs ran all night, a constant mechanical heartbeat beneath our floor. In the winter, the hallway smelled like bleach and wet socks. In the summer, like steam and detergent, the air thick and heavy. My mother slept on a narrow couch in the living room so I could have the bedroom. She called it an investment in the future when anyone asked why she did it. I didn't know the word sacrifice yet, but I knew what it looked like. Her nodding off over a pot of boiling rice, her shoulders slumped, that green wallet never quite closing all the way. The first time I realized we were poor was in middle school, when a classmate invited me to a birthday party at a roller skating rink. Everyone else arrived in cars, wearing brand-name jackets. My coat was a hand-me-down from a neighbor, the zipper slightly busted so cold air snuck through the gap. My mother pressed a $5 bill into my hand at the door. Her lips chapped from the wind. "This is for the skate rental," she whispered. "I'll pick you up after my shift." I watched another girl pay with a crisp 20 and still have money left for snacks. I slid my wrinkled bill across the counter, conscious of the cashier's bored glance. That night, when I got home, I saw my mother sitting at the table with her notepad open. There was a gap between groceries and rent where a number should have been. "You didn't have to pay for it," I blurted, guilt hitting me all at once. She looked up, surprised. "You're a kid," she said. "You're allowed to have some fun." Her smile was gentle, but I noticed how she held the calculator afterward, tapping the same key twice, like she was trying to squeeze something out of thin air. As soon as I turned 16, I got my first job washing dishes at a diner 2 bus lines away. The manager gave me a faded apron and a pair of gloves too big for my hands. At the end of my first week, I brought home an envelope with my name on it, the paper still stiff, the ink smudged where someone's thumb had pressed too hard. We opened it together at the table. My mother handled the bills the way she always had, slow, deliberate. She counted them twice, then slid a few back into the envelope. "These are yours," she said, "for your things, clothes, school stuff." "What about groceries?" I asked. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, just long enough for me to see the truth. "I'll manage," she said. "I always do." That was when I started slipping money into the green wallet when she wasn't looking. A 10 here, a 20 there. Enough to keep the grocery line on the notepad from shrinking too much. She pretended not to notice. I pretended not to see the relief in her shoulders. The glass jar by the door filled with old bus passes over the years. When the rubber band broke, I replaced it with another. Sometimes I'd hold one up to the light, tracing the punched-out holes with my fingertip, thinking about all the mornings we'd stood in the cold waiting for a ride, all the nights we'd come home exhausted but still moving. I couldn't wait to get out, but leaving never felt simple. I did it in stages. Community college first, paid with a mix of grants, small loans, and whatever tips I could scrape together from serving. Then a series of cramped apartments shared with too many roommates, mattresses on floors, walls thin enough to hear other people's arguments through. I learned how to stretch a bag of rice and frozen vegetables into dinners for a week. I learned how to time my shower so I could stand under hot water for exactly 7 minutes before the tank ran cold. I learned to keep my own notepad of expenses, my handwriting messier than my mother's, but the intent the same. I told myself I was different, though, that I wasn't stuck the way she had been, that I wouldn't tie my entire life to someone else's needs. The first serious relationship I had in my 20s proved how wrong I was. Her name was Kayla. She moved into my studio after a month, bringing a single suitcase and an entire storm's worth of chaos with her. She talked about music, about art, about how the world had tried to break her spirit and failed. I fell hard for the way she smiled when she called me steady, like it was the highest praise she could give. She was bad with money, not just careless, almost allergic to it. She'd lose track of cash, forget about bills, shrug off overdraft fees with a laugh. "You stress too much," she'd say when I tried to sit down with a printout of our bank statement. "We'll figure it out." But what she meant was, I would figure it out. I remember one afternoon when a red notice came in the mail about our electricity. We were 2 days from shutoff. I'd been sure I'd paid that bill. I had the receipt clipped to my notepad. When I checked, I saw the transaction had bounced because someone had used the account for a frivolous online purchase the night before. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone. "It was just a dress," she said. "I needed something nice for my cousin's wedding." "Don't freak out." "It's not about the dress," I said. "We don't have it. That money was already promised." "You always talk like that," she muttered, "like we're 2 inches away from disaster." I looked at the notice in my hand, the bold red letters, the due date circled. We were. That night, I stayed late at the cafe, taking an extra shift to cover the difference. The manager handed me my pay in another thin paper envelope. I put it in my apron pocket and felt its slight weight with every step I took. When I got home, the green wallet my mother had given me when I moved out was on the table. I opened it and slid the new bills inside, then sat there for a long time with my fingers resting on the worn edges. That relationship ended the way those relationships often do, slowly, then all at once. A final fight, a slammed door, a missing jar of coins I'd been saving for a bus pass refill. I promised myself I'd do better next time, that I'd choose someone who treated my effort as partnership, not as a given. When I met the woman who would eventually call me her little bitch behind my back, she seemed like the answer to that promise. We met in a night class, both of us trying to piece together something resembling a future out of late assignments and part-time jobs. She was sharp, quick-witted, and beautiful in that unpolished way that made you believe she was honest. She joked about being bad with mornings. She laughed about sleeping through alarms, about always needing someone to drag her out of bed. "I'd be lost without human alarm clocks," she said once, grinning. "If I ever live with someone, that'll be their job." It sounded like a joke at the time. I laughed with her. I thought she meant it lightly, that we were all just tired and trying to cope with humor. She admired how I tracked my expenses. "You're so disciplined," she said once, flipping through my notepad of bills. I could never. The way she said it made discipline feel like a compliment instead of a burden. It started small, a ride here, a loan there. "Can you spot me for groceries? My paycheck's late." "Can I borrow your bus pass this week? I'll buy the next one." "You're already up early for work. Can you just make sure I'm awake too? You're so good at that sort of thing." I didn't mind at first. It's easier to give when you've spent most of your life giving. It feels familiar. It feels like purpose. One night, she came over with a plastic bag of cheap takeout and an apologetic smile. "I forgot my wallet," she said. "Can you cover this one? I swear I'll get the next 3. I opened the green wallet out of habit, even though I already knew how thin it was. There was one 20 and a handful of ones. I handed her the 20 without looking her in the eye. "Thank you," she said, kissing my cheek. "You're such a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you." That sentence sank into me like a warm blanket and a weight all at once. Over time, the small favors stacked up. When we eventually moved in together, my financial habits became part of the house infrastructure. I was the one who remembered due dates. I was the one who approached the landlord if something was wrong. I was the one who stretched our groceries when she forgot to transfer her share of the money. She liked to say I grounded her, that I made life easier, that I kept things from falling apart. I liked believing her. The glass jar by the door followed me from apartment to apartment. Its shape changed over the years, a repurposed salsa jar, then an old candle holder, but the purpose stayed the same, a place for bus passes, spare coins, tiny proof that we kept moving forward even when it was hard. She'd toss her loose change into it with a laugh. "Look at us," she'd say, "building our little survival fund." Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit at the table with my own notepad of expenses and the green wallet open beside it. The numbers rarely added up the way I wanted them to. Her name was never on the page, but her weight was everywhere between the lines. There's a kind of loyalty that gets trained into you slowly, like a muscle built from repetition. You wake people up, you fix the missed bills. You quietly cover the short months and tell yourself it's just this once, even when it's never just once. You become dependable, predictable, soft around the edges in exactly the ways that make other people's lives easier. I thought that made me a good partner. I didn't realize how dangerously close it put me to something else. The last time my mother visited our apartment, she stood by the door, looking at the glass jar with its cluster of passes and coins. She picked up one of the old cards, the corners softened from years of use, and turned it over in her fingers. "You kept this habit," she said, smiling gently. "I like that." I smiled back, but something in my chest tightened. "I guess I'm still trying to prove we kept going," I said. Her eyes lingered on me a second longer than usual, as if she saw more than I was saying. "Just make sure you're not the only one walking," she murmured. I laughed it off then, brushing the comment away as another motherly worry. But later that night, when I sat alone at the table with the green wallet and my notepad and the faint sound of my girlfriend snoring in the bedroom, that sentence echoed around the room like a warning I didn't want to hear. I didn't know it yet, but I had been training my whole life to be the kind of person someone could brag about using. When I finally opened the screenshot, the bus shelter around me seemed to disappear. It was a message from her friend Jasmine sent into their group chat the night before, the one with the same 3 women she always complained and gossiped with. My girlfriend's name lit up in blue, her words stacked neatly under her own profile picture. I didn't have to scroll far. "You know what I love?" she'd written. "I live like a boss with a full-time maid who thinks she's my partner." Someone had replied with a string of laughing emojis. Another, "As long as she pays and obeys, keep her." My girlfriend had answered, "Exactly. She handles the boring money stuff and wakes me up. Low maintenance. I barely have to pretend." The phone felt slippery in my hand. The wind knifed between the buildings, pushing old receipts along the sidewalk. One glued itself to my shoe, fluttering each time I shifted my weight. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. A bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. The doors yawned open. People impatiently shifted around me to climb on. I stepped aside, letting them go first, my eyes still stuck on that word. Maid. I'd once thought of myself as practical, responsible. A woman who'd built a life out of small, precise choices. Now, through her eyes, I was reduced to a role that sounded like a punchline in a cruel story. I got on the bus only when the driver cleared his throat loudly and muttered, "You getting in or sightseeing?" I fumbled for my bus pass. The current one was new, the card crisp with only a few hole punches, but tucked in my wallet behind it was an older one, edges softened, almost full. My fingers brushed both as I pulled the top card out. The driver punched it without looking at me. As I walked down the aisle, I thought of the glass jar by our door, half full with old passes and coins. I'd shown it to her once when we first moved in, proud of the way I'd always managed to keep moving forward, even when I'd had almost nothing. "Cute," she'd said back then, tipping it so the passes clinked. "You and your little struggle trophies." I'd laughed it off. At the time, I'd taken it as awkward affection. Now it echoed in my head as contempt. I found a seat and sat down. The bus lurched into motion, the city smearing past the scratched window. My reflection stared back at me. Late 40s, hair pulled into a low bun, lines etched permanently at the corners of my eyes. I looked tired in a way concealer couldn't fix. I should have deleted the screenshot. Instead, I took another one, zooming in on her words, as if I needed proof that I wasn't exaggerating. My thumb hovered over the share icon, then dropped. Who would I even send it to? My mother? She'd only worry. Maria? She was my supervisor, not my confidant. I slipped my phone back into my bag and gripped the green wallet instead. The vinyl was more worn than I remembered, the corners almost completely peeled. For a moment, I imagined throwing it out and buying a new one, clean, smooth, untouched by years of stretching to cover other people's choices. But the thought made my chest ache. That wallet was the only thing that had stayed with me from that one bedroom above the laundromat to here. Everything else had shifted. Jobs, apartments, partners. Somehow the wallet endured. Back at the apartment that night, the jar by the door was overturned. Old bus passes and coins littered the floor, scattered across the mat like someone had kicked it in a hurry. A few passes were bent clean in half. Others stepped on, their corners folded sharply. The jar lay on its side, a small crack spidering from the base upward, like a fault line crawling through glass. I set my bag down slowly. "Did you knock this over?" She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling on her phone. The TV was on, volume low, flickering a blue light across her face. "Maybe," she said without looking up. "It was in the way. I almost tripped." "You could have picked it up." I bent to gather the passes, smoothing them out, feeling ridiculous for how careful my fingers were. She sighed loudly, the exhale exaggerated. "You and your trash. It's just old cardboard." "They're bus passes," I said. "They matter to me." "Everything matters to you," she muttered, "especially things that don't." The silence that followed pressed down on my ears. I kept picking up the cards anyway, even as I felt her eyes move to me for the first time that evening. They skimmed over me, assessing in that cool, detached way I was starting to resent instead of crave. "You're really not going to apologize," she said finally. "For what?" "For sabotaging my exam, for making me look stupid, for acting like a victim now because I talked a little shit to my friends." My hands stilled. A bent bus pass lay between my fingers, the hole punches forming a jagged line. "You didn't talk a little," I said. "You called me your maid, your bitch. You said you barely had to pretend to care about me." Her jaw tightened. "So you snooped through my phone now?" "I saw a screenshot," I said. "Someone sent it anonymously." Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, so you've got spies now." The TV light flickered across her face, turning one side blue and the other harsh white. It made her look split in two. One part girl I'd loved, another part stranger who measured my worth in chores completed. "It doesn't matter how I saw it," I said. "It matters that you said it." She scoffed. "You're seriously going to throw away our relationship over jokes in a group chat?" My throat felt tight. You don't joke about someone being your servant unless you feel comfortable with the idea. Her lips curled. "You're mad because it's a little too true." That sentence sliced straight through me. For a second, I forgot to breathe. The passes slipped from my fingers and fell back to the floor. She noticed. She also noticed that I didn't argue. "That's what I thought," she said, her voice softer now, almost satisfied. "You know what you are in this. You do the boring stuff. I shine. It's a win-win." I straightened slowly, my knees protesting. I set the cracked jar upright and dropped the passes back in. The crack caught the light, a thin white line, barely visible but unmistakable once you'd seen it. I said nothing. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. "Say something," she demanded after a moment, irritation replacing smugness. "What do you want me to say?" My voice came out hoarse. "That you're sorry, that you get it, that you'll stop being dramatic and go back to normal." I thought of my mother's hands counting bills, of how she'd always stretched herself until there was nothing left that was purely hers, of how I'd promised myself I wouldn't repeat that life. My tongue pressed against the back of my teeth. The words "I'm sorry" sat there, so familiar they almost slipped out on instinct. I bit my lip instead. She watched me fight myself. Her gaze narrowed. "Wow," she said. "You really are trying to grow a backbone. Cute." She stood up and walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge. A cold, pale light spilled out, washing the linoleum and the lower half of the cabinets. I noticed the nearly empty shelf, a carton of eggs, a half-used stick of butter, a container of leftovers I'd been saving for my lunch shift. "We're low on food," she called out casually. "You get paid tomorrow, right?" "Yes," I said slowly. "Good," she said, "because I ordered takeout for tonight. I used your card. You had enough." My head jerked up. "You what?" She leaned against the fridge door, smirking. "Relax, you always say you're on top of the bills. I just made sure we wouldn't starve while you're busy being offended." I walked into the kitchen, my socks sliding slightly on the cold floor. "You can't just use my card without asking." "I know your PIN," she said. "It's practically joint at this point." "It isn't," I said, heat rising in my cheeks. "The rent comes out of that account. The utilities, the phone, you can't dip into it for food on a whim." "On a whim?" she repeated, her voice rising. "So now feeding us is a whim?" I faltered. She saw it and pressed. "You're always so dramatic about money," she said. "It's depressing. Maybe if you made more, you wouldn't act like every dollar is a war." That one landed like a slap. She'd never talked about my income that way before. She knew exactly how hard I worked, how I picked up extra shifts, covered holidays, came home with feet aching and shoulders burning. I leaned my back against the counter to steady myself. The laminate was cold against my spine. In the corner of my eye, the yellow notepad I used to track our expenses lay next to the microwave, a faint ring of moisture staining the edge of the last page. A glass had been set on it while wet and removed without a thought. The ink on the most recent line, rent due 15th, had bled slightly, the numbers blurred. "When were you going to tell me you're embarrassed by how much I make?" I asked quietly. She shut the fridge door with more force than necessary. The light vanished, leaving the kitchen dim, only the weak glow from the hallway seeping in. "You're twisting my words," she said. "I'm saying if you weren't so hung up on being the responsible one, maybe I wouldn't feel like I'm living with my mother." I flinched. "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" she shot back, stepping closer. "Is you deciding to punish me by letting me fail my exam, then playing the martyr when I call you out? You want a different kind of relationship? Then stop being so small. Stop clinging to every coin like it's oxygen." There it was. Sharp cruelty delivered clean. No sugar, no joke to hide behind. My throat tightened. I tried to speak and nothing came. For a terrifying second, I couldn't even swallow. The air in the kitchen thickened, every sound in the apartment falling away. All that remained was the faint hum of the fridge and the pounding of my own pulse in my ears. She noticed my silence and mistook it for surrender. "Thought so," she said softly, satisfaction creeping back into her tone. "Tomorrow you'll go to work, pay the bills, and wake me up for my retake when I get it scheduled. And we'll forget this little tantrum ever happened." I forced a breath in through my nose, out through my mouth. "I need my card back," I managed. She rolled her eyes and fished it out of her hoodie pocket, flipping it between her fingers like a casino chip. For a moment, she held it up just out of reach, watching my hand extend. The cold overhead light from the hallway caught the plastic just right, reflecting a hard, pale gleam. It struck me then how much of my life had been reduced to this, reaching for what was supposed to be mine while someone else decided when to let go. Finally, she slapped the card into my palm and walked away. "I'm taking a shower," she announced. "Try not to overthink this to death while I'm gone." The bathroom door closed. A moment later, the water kicked on, a steady rush behind the wall. The sound filled the apartment, masking my shaky breathing. I sat at the table, the card heavy in my hand. I opened the green wallet and slid it back into its usual slot. There were fewer bills in there than I'd remembered. 2 10s, a 5, a few 1s. Enough for a couple of bus rides, maybe a bit of extra food if I was careful. On the other side of the table, the yellow notepad lay askew, corners damp, edges curling. I straightened it and flipped back a few pages. The earlier entries were neat, the ink dark, the lines straight. As the months passed, the writing grew more cramped. The numbers adjusted and readjusted until they overlapped. At the bottom of one page, I had written savings and circled it. The line next to it was blank. I lifted my pen, stared at that blank line, then set the pen down without writing anything. The silence in my head was almost louder than my thoughts. When the water stopped, I closed the notebook and pushed it away. The next few weeks slid into a pattern so slowly, I might have missed it if I hadn't already been watching for cracks. She started making comments in private that were sharper, more precise. If I hesitated before paying for something, she'd say, "Here we go again, the budget committee is in session." If I reminded her of a bill, she'd sigh dramatically. "You're killing the vibe. No wonder you're exhausted all the time. You never let yourself breathe." When I picked up an extra shift and came home past midnight, she was waiting on the couch. The lights were off, the room lit only by the blue glow of her phone. She didn't look up when I came in. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag quietly. "You took the late shift without asking," she said. Her tone was flat. "I told you last week," I replied. "We need the overtime. The gas bill went up." She locked her phone and finally looked at me. "You know what it feels like?" she said slowly. "To come home and not know if your person will be there? To feel like you're second to their job?" I stared at her. "I was working for us." "That's what you always say," she murmured. "But most people put their relationships first." A bitter laugh rose in my throat. I swallowed it back. "Most people don't treat their partner like hired help." Her eyes flashed. "If you're so unhappy," she said, "why are you still here?" The question hung between us, heavier than anything we'd said that day. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She watched the struggle, the way my jaw tensed, the way my fingers curled around the strap of my bag. Then she nodded once. "Exactly," she said. She stood and brushed past me, the faint scent of her shampoo trailing behind. After she went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, the only light the thin line under the bedroom door. The green wallet lay on the table, closed. The cracked jar by the door glinted in the faint city light sneaking through the blinds. Inside, the bus passes leaned against each other, bent and creased, holding one another up. Barely. I thought about leaving. The idea appeared not as a fully formed plan, but as a flicker. Me packing a bag, taking my wallet, my notepad, slipping out while she slept. Me waking up to my own alarm in a different place where no one expected breakfast or wake-up calls from me like it was a birthright. The thought terrified me. It also made my chest loosen for half a second. Then my mind flooded with all the practical obstacles. First month's rent, deposits, time off work to move, no car, no savings. My eyes drifted back to the blank savings line in the notepad. She knew exactly where my limits were. She lived inside the math of my life just as much as I did. Later that week, she came home with a bag of groceries and dropped them on the counter with exaggerated effort. "See," she said, "I bought food, so you can stop acting like I never do anything." I looked in the bags. Frozen dinners, snacks, soda, a small pack of vegetables shoved at the bottom like an afterthought. The receipt, long and crumpled, was shoved into one of the bags. I pulled it out and scanned the total. "You used the credit card," I said. "So?" she replied. "It's still money." "It's debt," I said. "We talked about paying that down. We said only essentials." She leaned back against the counter and folded her arms. "Food is essential." "We talked about cooking more, remember?" I opened the freezer. It was already jammed with similar purchases. "These are expensive. We could have bought ingredients for a week with half of this." "God," she snapped, "you suck the joy out of everything. I can't even buy snacks without getting a lecture." "It's not a lecture," I said. "It's reality. The interest rate on that card." She slapped her palm on the counter, hard. The sound cracked through the kitchen, making me flinch. "I don't want to hear about interest rates," she shouted. "I want a partner who doesn't act like every purchase is a sin." Her voice bounced off the walls, echoing. I noticed the ceiling above the stove, how the paint was starting to yellow at the corners from years of steam and neglect. I wondered absently when I'd have time to scrub it. She saw my gaze drift and mistook it for boredom. "Are you even listening?" she demanded. "I am," I said quietly. "I just don't know how to make you see what I see." "Then maybe the problem is your vision," she said coldly. "Maybe you're just built to live small." My cheeks burned. I felt myself shrinking in that moment, as if she'd reached inside and pinched something that had been trying, tentatively, to expand. That night, when we got into bed, she lay turned away from me, her back a curved wall. The room was cold. The heater in our unit had been unreliable for months. I'd called the landlord twice. He'd promised to send someone and never did. I curled up, pulling the thin blanket tighter around me. My toes were numb. I thought about asking her if she was cold too, if she wanted another blanket. The words rose to my lips and died there. She broke the silence instead. "You know," she said into the darkness, "I could find someone else who doesn't make everything so heavy." The sentence was casual, tossed out conversationally, but it landed like a stone dropped in deep water. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the faint shadow of the cracked jar on the dresser across the room. The silhouette of it looked warped, the crack turning its outline into something slightly off-kilter. "Is that what you want?" I whispered finally. She didn't answer. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the faint buzzing of the refrigerator through the wall, the drip of the bathroom faucet, the soft huff of her breathing. Just when I thought she'd fallen asleep, she spoke again, her voice low. "What I want," she said, "is for you to remember your place." My breath caught. A small, involuntary sound escaped my throat, somewhere between a sigh and a gasp. I clamped my lips shut around it. She heard anyway. I felt her shift slightly, satisfied. Then she settled back into stillness. I lay rigid, the blanket suddenly too tight around my chest, the room too small. The weight of all the years I'd spent teaching myself how to be indispensable pressed down on me until my lungs ached. For the first time, a question formed in words clear enough to scare me. If I kept living like this, clinging to my green wallet and my bus passes and my careful notepads, while someone else stepped on all of it and called it love, how long before there was nothing left of me but the part that obeyed? I stared into the dark, listening to the silence grow heavier, and realized I was closer to that line than I had ever allowed myself to admit. The snap didn't come with a scream or a fight. It came with a declined transaction for bread and bus fare. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray day that makes everything look tired. I stopped at the small grocery store on the corner after work, the one with flickering lights and dented cans, discounted near the door. I picked up a loaf of cheap wheat bread, a carton of eggs, and a jar of the off-brand peanut butter that always left oil on top no matter how much you stirred. I knew almost exactly how much it would cost. I'd done the math in my head before I even walked in. At the register, I slid my card into the reader and keyed in my PIN. The machine beeped once, then flashed a red message. Transaction declined. I felt my cheeks heat. "Can you try it again?" I asked the cashier. He shrugged, chewing his gum slowly. "Sure." I wiped my thumb on my jeans and tried again, pressing the buttons carefully, as if neatness would make a difference. The same message flashed. He didn't look surprised. "You got another card?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just this one." Behind me, someone sighed loudly. The line wasn't long, but it suddenly felt like a crowd. I could feel eyes on the back of my neck, the same heavy awareness I'd felt at the cafe when she raised her voice in front of the customers. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'll leave these." I stepped aside, leaving the bread, eggs, and peanut butter sitting on the counter like a small, failed attempt at stability. The cashier turned to the next customer without another word. By the time I got to the door, someone had already pushed my items to the far side of the counter, out of the way. Outside, the air smelled faintly of exhaust and damp concrete. I leaned against the brick wall and pulled out my phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy on the screen. I opened the banking app and logged in. The number at the top of the screen made no sense. Not low, wrong, off. Like part of it had been erased. For a moment, my brain tried to smooth it away. Maybe the paycheck hadn't fully posted yet. Maybe a bill had come out early. Maybe I'd misremembered. I scrolled down. There they were. In the past week, 3 food delivery charges I didn't recognize. A ride share at 2 a.m. from a part of town we never went to together. A clothing store purchase. The name of a place she'd mentioned once, laughing about how they catered to people with taste and money. The total of those charges was almost exactly the amount I'd mentally set aside for rent. I clicked on one of them. The timestamp was from the night she'd forgotten to pick me up from my late shift. I remembered standing outside the cafe in the cold, my breath visible, waiting for her headlights to pull in. They never did. She'd texted 20 minutes later. "Sorry, fell asleep." I'd taken the bus home. Apparently, she'd been awake, and she hadn't been alone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I clicked back. There were more. Little things that hadn't registered before in the stream of transactions. Small charges at cafes near campus, another ride share, a bar, $10 here, $18 there, $35 once, tagged at midnight. Each one was a tiny cut. Alone, they were annoying. Together, they were a pattern. I scrolled further back and saw other charges I recognized not from memory, but from arguments I'd thought were about something else. Times she'd snapped that I was suffocating her when I asked why we were short. Nights she'd called me dramatic for wanting to stay in instead of going out. All along, I'd been patching holes she'd carved into the boat and then blaming myself for the leaks. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I swiped to the credit card account. The balance there had climbed too, higher than I remembered. The most recent charge, the grocery run she'd bragged about, the one with the frozen dinners and snacks. She'd used the card after telling me to stop clinging to every coin. I opened my green wallet with my free hand. The vinyl creaked. Inside, the few bills I'd counted the night before were still there, but now they looked smaller. Not money, just paper with numbers that never seemed to stretch far enough. There were no hidden reserves, no safety net, just a tired woman with a cracked wallet and an account someone else treated like an endless faucet. For a moment, panic surged up, hot and familiar. The same urge I'd always had, to fix, to cover, to rearrange the numbers until the crisis disappeared, rose in my chest. Then something else slid in behind it, quieter, denser. It settled low in my stomach and spread, slow and steady. If I kept using every bit of strength I had to patch her holes, I was going to drown in someone else's disaster. A bus rolled by in front of me, splashing slush onto the curb. I stepped back just in time. The spray narrowly missed my shoes, soaking the hem of my jeans instead. The cold seeped into the fabric, clinging to my skin. I looked at the damp patches climbing my legs and thought of all the times I'd told myself, "It's just water, it'll dry, it's not that bad." I was tired of downplaying the damage. I opened my messages and scrolled to the top of our conversation. So many threads. Dinner plans, reminders, photos, jokes. Buried between them, I found her messages about money, screenshots she'd sent of her grades, her class schedule, the exam registration. Above one of them, months ago, she'd written, "We're a team, right? You'll help me get through this. I don't do well with logistics." I'd replied with a heart and, "Of course." My hand tightened around the phone. That was the promise she'd been cashing in on ever since, that I'd be the logistics. The wallet, the alarm clock, the quiet force that made her life run smoothly while she laughed about it with people who didn't know my name beyond the bitch who obeys. The humiliation from the grocery store still burned, but beneath it, something sharpened. It wasn't rage. Rage would have made me reckless. This felt cleaner, colder. Like the moment a fog lifts and you finally see the shape of the road you've been walking. She wasn't just unkind, she wasn't just careless with words. She was using me in the most literal sense, my time, my body, my emotional labor, and now, staring back at me in black numbers on a bright screen, my money. And if I didn't change something, she would keep doing it until there was nothing left. I took a slow breath, my fingers numb from the cold and from the weight of what I'd just admitted to myself. I snapped a screenshot of the bank transactions, then another of the credit card charges, then another of the messages from her friends, the ones where they said, "As long as she pays and obeys, keep her." My hand shook slightly, but not from fear. It felt more like my body trying to catch up with a decision my mind had already made. For years, I'd used my notepad to track where every dollar went so I could bend my life around other people's needs. Now, as the bus pulled away and the street fell quiet again, I realized I could bend that habit in another direction. I couldn't fix what she'd already taken, but I could stop pretending it was an accident. The next time someone called me small for worrying about money, I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to defend my caution like it was something to be ashamed of. I was going to treat it like proof that I knew exactly what was happening. I tucked the phone back into my bag, the green wallet pressing against it. For the first time, they didn't feel like tools to keep her afloat. They felt like the first pieces of a life I might build without her. I pushed myself off the brick wall, the cold biting into my damp jeans, and started walking home, already knowing that when I crossed our threshold, I would look at every object, every bill, every jar, every pass, with new eyes. And I knew that if she tried to tell me again to remember my place, I wouldn't be standing in the same place she thought I was. I spent the rest of the walk home with my hands deep in my pockets, feeling the shape of the green wallet against my thigh with every step. It was heavier than the few bills inside it, heavy with years of habit, of instinct, of bending myself into a woman who could stretch every dollar until it snapped thin. Now, it felt like an object I had to study instead of rely on. By the time I reached the apartment building, the early evening cold had settled into my clothes. Up the stairs, through the narrow hallway, past the peeling paint and the neighbor's door that never fully closed, I reached our place and paused. I listened. No music, no TV, just the faint hum of the refrigerator. She wasn't home yet. The silence let something unclench inside me. I slipped inside, shutting the door with a soft click. The air smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. The cracked jar sat on the entry table exactly where I'd left it, tilted, uneven, still wounded along the glass seam. I picked it up. The crack felt deeper now beneath my thumb. The bus passes inside leaned crookedly, many of them bent from being stepped on. This was what Phase 3 anchors were supposed to become. The same symbols, more damaged, more honest. I set the jar down gently, then I opened the drawer beneath it and pulled out the yellow notepad. The last time I'd touched it, the page had been blank except for the word savings. Tonight, that blank space felt like an accusation, or a map. I sat at the kitchen table, flicked on the overhead light, and began listing everything I could remember about our finances: rent, utilities, grocery totals, transportation, shared expenses. The little things I usually covered because it felt easier than asking her twice. I tallied the amounts, cross-checking with the banking app and the charges she'd made. The total she'd spent without asking me made my stomach tighten. I took a slow breath. This wasn't rage. Rage would have made me slam the pen down. This was precision, detachment, a kind of cold calculation I hadn't allowed myself to use for years. I opened my green wallet and took out the receipt stuffed behind the bus pass. There were more than I expected: crumpled, faded, some stained with water spots or oil. I smoothed them out on the table, flattening each one. They formed a small, damaged mosaic of all the ways I'd stretched myself thin to keep us afloat. One of the receipts made me stop. A grocery store slip for $47.18. The date on it was the day she'd told me she covered food so I could stop acting dramatic. She hadn't mentioned using the credit card. She hadn't mentioned the overdraft fee that hit the next morning because of it. I took a picture of the receipt, then another. Then I placed it in a clean envelope. Evidence. Not for a courtroom. For myself. For the confrontation I knew had to come. A low vibration buzzed through the table. My phone lit up. A message from her. "Where are you?" A beat later. "Don't be weird. Dinner soon." I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down. Another buzz. Then, "Answer me." The screen lit the underside of my wrist with a cold glow. I ignored it. Instead, I pulled the banking app back up and scrolled to every unfamiliar charge. I made a list. Screenshotted each one. Labeled nothing. Spoke to no one. Just captured what was already true. My hands were steady now. That scared me more than if they'd been shaking. I heard the sharp click of the lock turning. I didn't move. The table was still covered in receipts, the open notepad, my wallet, the envelope of evidence. I didn't have time to hide anything before she stepped inside. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, shrugged off her coat, and spotted me at the table. "Oh, good," she said, kicking off her shoes. "You're home. I thought you were ignoring me again." Her voice was light, but her eyes flicked to the table, scanning the papers. She frowned. "What's all this?" The exhaustion in me deepened into something firm. "Bills," I said. "Transactions." She squinted at my organized chaos. "You're doing that now?" I literally just walked in. I needed to see where the money went. She stretched her arms above her head and groaned. "We've been over this. You obsess." I didn't respond. She noticed. A small, irritated line formed between her eyebrows. She walked to the fridge, opened it, and stared inside like she expected dinner to magically appear. "Did you cook?" "No." She sighed loudly. "So nothing's ready." Again. A small micro crack formed in the air between us. I felt it. She turned, leaning against the fridge. "You could have at least answered my texts." "I was working. I texted after your shift. I was busy." "Busy doing what?" she challenged. I let the silence settle, heavy, intentional. Her expression sharpened in response. She stepped closer. "Okay, clearly you're doing the thing again, the martyr thing. The look how much I suffer thing." I placed a receipt on top of the notepad without looking at her. "This is the grocery run you said you paid for." She frowned. "Yeah, and?" "You used the credit card." "So?" "So you told me we were trying to pay it down." She gave a dismissive wave. "One thing at a time." "It's not one thing," she rolled her eyes. "Here we go." The lights above flickered slightly. A bulb somewhere was dying. It cast the room in an uneven glow, making the shadows under her eyes look deeper. "You're acting like a detective," she said. "It's pathetic." "I'm trying to understand." "Understand what?" she snapped. "That you're bad at letting go? That you're incapable of trusting someone? That you need control to feel safe?" The words were weapons, soft-tipped but aimed with precision. Another vibration hit my phone. I kept it face down, but she glanced at it. "Who's blowing you up?" she asked. "No one." Her eyebrow arched. "Secrets now? Cute." I stood slowly, papers in hand. The chair scraped softly against the floor. She watched every movement. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To the bedroom." "Why?" "I need a minute." She laughed once, bitter and short. "You always need a minute right when things get real." My chest tightened, but not with panic, with clarity. Before I turned away, she spoke again, quieter now. "If you're planning something stupid like moving out, don't forget you can't afford this place on your own." There it was, not screamed, not taunted, just stated as if it were fact, another gravity she expected me to obey. I walked down the hallway toward the bedroom, her voice following me like a hook. "Don't do anything rash," she said. "You're not built for independence." A silence stretched inside my ribs, taut as a wire. I closed the bedroom door behind me. Inside, the air felt different, still, heavier. The low evening light seeped through the blinds, painting faint stripes across the bedspread. I set the receipts on the dresser beside the cracked jar. I opened the envelope and slid the screenshots inside. Then I opened the nightstand drawer and found the old bus pass I'd kept from years ago, the one with the faded ink and nearly complete holes. The anchor, survival, movement, proof of continuing even when everything was hard. It felt different in my hand now, not hopeful, not nostalgic. A reminder. I had walked myself out of tight corners before, on small budgets, on smaller courage, with no one to hold the door. My phone buzzed again. I finally flipped it over. A new message from an unknown number. "You don't deserve how she talks about you. If you need help, say something." My breath hitched. Attached beneath the message was a screenshot. Not the one I'd received earlier, another one. This time, it was her bragging not just about using my money, but about how easy it was to keep me in line. My grip tightened on the phone. Footsteps creaked down the hallway. She was coming toward the bedroom, and she sounded angry. Her footsteps came down the hallway, sharp, irritated, the soles of her shoes slapping the floor like punctuation marks. I tucked the screenshots back into the envelope and pressed the drawer shut just as she reached the door. "Open it," she said. There was no knock, no hesitation, just command. I stood there for a second, staring at the faint shadow of her feet under the door. My own heartbeat felt strangely steady. When I finally turned the knob and opened it, she pushed past me as if she owned the room. "What's your problem now?" she demanded. She scanned the dresser, then the envelope. Her eyes narrowed. "Are you seriously doing some secret investigation? Are you out of your mind?" I closed the door behind her. You need to stop raising your voice." "Oh, I'm raising it," she snapped. "You're the one sneaking around behind my back like some jealous housewife going through receipts." Her words were meant to sting, but they slid past me this time. There was too much clarity sitting in my chest. "I'm not sneaking," I said. "I'm documenting." She blinked. "Documenting what?" "What you've been doing." A thin, disbelieving laugh left her throat. "You're unbelievable." I walked past her to the dresser. My hand hovered over the envelope but didn't touch it yet. "You've been using my accounts, my credit, my time, my labor, and you've been telling people I obey you." "It was a joke," she said quickly. "You said you barely have to pretend to care about me." Her lips parted, just slightly, but no denial came. Only a small twitch at the corner of her mouth, like she was trying to decide which version of herself to put on. "That's out of context," she finally said. I pulled the envelope open and laid out the screenshots on the dresser. Her eyes flicked down. I watched her pupils tighten as she took in each image. The bank charges, the rideshare receipts, the group chat comments with her name glowing proudly above them. She sucked in a breath. "Where did you get these?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters," she snapped, "because whoever sent you this is trying to ruin us." "Us?" I repeated. "You've already been doing that on your own." She shot me a look sharp enough to cut through the dim light of the room. "You don't talk to me like that." "I just did." She stepped closer. "You need to calm down and stop acting like the whole world falls apart every time someone spends $1. Those dollars were rent." She opened her mouth, then closed it. A muscle jumped along her jaw. "You're acting dramatic again," she said. "You always do this. You twist everything until I'm the villain." "You've been lying," I said. "Stealing. Mocking me to your friends." "It wasn't stealing," she hissed. "We live together, and I have to vent somewhere. You're impossible sometimes." "That's not venting. That's dehumanizing." She threw her hands up. "Oh my God, you're such a victim. Always so fragile." Fragile. The word landed in my stomach like a stone dropped down a well. From the corner of my eye, I saw the cracked jar on the dresser. A sliver of moonlight caught the fracture running through the glass, turning it bright white for a moment, like a thin lightning bolt trapped in stillness. Her gaze followed mine, and then she had the nerve to snort. "Seriously?" she said. "You're still attached to that junk? That's part of your problem. You clutch everything too tightly, old receipts, old passes, old wounds." "They're reminders," I said quietly, "of what it took to get here." "To your tiny little life?" she scoffed. "Congratulations." My mouth tightened. "You need to stop talking." "You going to make me?" she taunted. "Come on. Show me this new tough version of you. Let's see it." I didn't move. That unsettled her more than anything I could have said. She folded her arms. "So what? You think confronting me with screenshots makes you powerful? You don't even have the guts to leave." I didn't respond. "You can't leave," she pressed. "You can't afford to live alone. You need me to be the one with the future. You're just—" She stopped, because I'd reached into my wallet and pulled out the oldest bus pass I owned, the nearly full one with the faded hole punches, the anchor, decayed now, bent nearly in half from being stepped on, but still intact. I set it on the dresser between us. Her eyebrows knit. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I've walked myself out of hard places before." She laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You, please. You can't even take a day off without panicking about money. That's because someone keeps spending it for me. That's the narrative you've built so you can justify this pity party," she snapped. "You have no idea how hard my life is, no idea what pressure I'm under." "You chose your pressure," I said, "and then you made me carry it." She stared at me as if she didn't recognize who was standing in front of her. "You're not the type to talk like this," she said slowly. "What did you do? Read some self-help crap? Did your little coworkers hype you up? Think you're suddenly some strong, independent woman? I'm not suddenly anything. Then stop pretending you're better than me. Her voice cracked then, not emotionally, but structurally. The polished confidence she wore so easily began to split like old varnish. She stepped forward. Too close. You owe me, she whispered. Do you understand that? I've put so much into this relationship. What exactly? My time, she snapped. My energy. She stopped again because she couldn't finish the sentence without lying. Her silence stretched, taut and ugly. I didn't feel it. She exhaled sharply. Fine, she said. Let's be honest then. You're boring. You're plain. You're safe. I picked you because you're easy to control, because you do what you're told, because you don't know your worth and you never will. My breath caught once. Only once. Then something inside me locked into place. She saw it. Her expression flickered. Surprise, then fear, then anger swallowing both. Oh, look at you, she said. Acting wounded, don't pretend you didn't already know your place. I reached for the envelope of screenshots. She lunged. Her hand shot out, grabbing the envelope before I could fully close my fingers around it. I held on instinctively. For a moment, we were both gripping the same piece of paper, our knuckles brushing, tension sparking between us like static. Give it to me, she hissed. No. She yanked harder. The envelope tore. Paper scattered. Receipts, screenshots, a bent pass fluttering between us like falling leaves. She stared at them, stunned. Then her face contorted. You're pathetic, she spat. Collecting all this crap like it's ammunition. You think anyone will care about your little ledger? Your babysitter accounting? Your trauma scrapbook? I care. That's the problem, she screamed. The room went still after the echo faded, the way silence sometimes expands after thunder. I knelt slowly and picked up the torn half of the envelope. My fingers brushed the bent bus pass again. This time I held it to the light. It looked worse than before, creased, worn, the ink nearly gone, but still here, still a record of every step that had carried me forward. Every survival counted. Her breathing was ragged now. She swiped at her face, pushing her hair back with trembling fingers. You're going to regret this, she said. Maybe, I replied, but I'm done pretending this is love. She gave a cold, humorless smile. Then say it. Say you're leaving. I stood. My heart thudded once, deeply. I'm leaving. The words didn't tremble. They didn't falter. They just existed, solid, immovable like a stone placed exactly where it needed to be. And she broke. No, you're not, she said immediately. No, you're not doing this. I am. You can't afford it. I'll manage. You won't survive without someone to take care of. I've taken care of myself my whole life. Her eyes widened because she realized the truth of it for the first time. She reached out suddenly, grabbing my wrist. You don't mean it, she said, her voice frantic now. You don't get to walk away from me. I decide when things end. I pulled my hand back. She stumbled a little, not expecting the resistance. For the first time, she looked small. Not me. Her. You're making a mistake, she whispered. I didn't answer. I was gathering the receipts, the screenshots, the envelope pieces, the notepad. My hands worked quickly, methodically. I didn't have to think. They moved the way my mother's had when she counted bills, precise, determined, without hesitation. Because this wasn't chaos anymore. This was preparation. She watched me gather the evidence, watched me place it all in a single stack. Her voice shook. Where are you taking that? I didn't respond. She stepped in front of the door, blocking it with her body. You're not going anywhere, she said. But her voice wasn't a command this time. It was a plea disguised as control, a fraying rope pretending it was still strong. I took one step toward her. She tensed, and then, My phone lit up on the dresser. One new message from the same unknown number. I saw only the preview, but it was enough. I didn't send you everything. You need to see the rest before you decide. She saw the light of the screen. She saw my eyes flick toward it, and panic, sharp and unmistakable, flashed across her face. "Don't open that," she whispered. I opened the message. There was no dramatic sound, no swell of music, just the soft tap of my thumb and the bright rectangle of truth. More screenshots, more of her words, the same group chat, different day. "She thinks we're building a life," she'd written. "I'm building a safety net. If the exam works out and I get a better job, I'm out. Until then, I'll let her play wife and wallet." Someone had replied, "Make sure she doesn't suspect. Act sweet." Her answer, "Please. She's just grateful I'm with her. She won't leave unless I push." The next screenshot was from the night she fell asleep instead of picking me up. "Out with real people for once," she'd sent. Selfie attached, different bar, different smile. "She's at work, it's fine. She'll probably bring home food and act like that's romance." At the bottom of the thread, there was a final message from a contact I recognized but had never met in person, a mutual acquaintance who'd met me once at a party and apparently decided that was enough to have an opinion. "You're playing with fire," they'd warned her. "She's not as weak as you think." No reply under that. I didn't know who had forwarded it all to me. They hadn't signed their name. They hadn't asked for a response. It didn't really matter. Whoever they were, they'd grabbed the edge of a curtain I'd been too tired to pull back and yanked. Behind me, she was still standing in the doorway, rigid. "I told you not to open it," she said hoarsely. I turned the phone toward her, not close enough for her to grab, just enough that she could see the brightness of her own words. Something in her face crumpled, not into remorse, but into calculation. I could almost see the wheels turning, searching for some new angle, some new version of the truth she could sell me. I didn't let her find it. "I'm not going to scream," I said quietly. "I'm not going to beg. I'm not even going to ask why." She swallowed. "Then what are you going to do?" I looked down at the bus pass in my hand, then at the green wallet on the dresser, then at the cracked jar with its leaning passes and coins. All these years, I'd used them to prove I could keep moving through anything. "Something overdue," I said. I walked past her to the closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and set it on the bed. The sound of the zipper unspooling across the fabric cut through the room. She stared. "You're being dramatic," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I folded my clothes with a calm I didn't fully feel yet. Work uniform, 2 pairs of jeans. The sweaters I actually liked, not the ones she'd bought and then critiqued until I stopped wearing them. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We're just in a rough patch. Every couple goes through this." "Maybe," I said, "but not every couple has one person planning their exit behind the other's back while using their money and calling them a maid." "You're twisting everything," she protested. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to twist. It all lay flat in front of us now. "What about the lease?" she tried again. "You can't just walk away. You'll owe money. You'll ruin your credit. You obsess about that, remember?" "I talked to the landlord last week," I said. "Asked what would happen if one of us left. He said as long as one person stays and keeps paying, he won't take action." Her eyes widened. "You went behind my back?" "Yes." The words sat between us, steady and unapologetic. "I'm not taking the apartment," I added. "I can't afford to shoulder all of it for you. I'll move into something smaller, closer to work. There's a studio above the cafe opening up next month. Maria told me. I already put my name in." "You planned this," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did. I just finally listened." She moved to the dresser and snatched up one of the receipts, crumpling it in her hand. "You're going to throw everything away over some screenshots and hurt feelings?" "I'm throwing away nothing," I said. "I'm letting go of someone who never held me gently in the first place." Her shoulders shook once. For a second, I saw the girl from our classes again, the one who talked about dreams and futures and how the world had done her wrong. Then it was gone. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just done?" "Yes." She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it will be my regret, not yours." She didn't follow me as I moved through the apartment, choosing what to pack and what to leave behind. I took my clothes, my small stack of books, my mother's old mug, the green wallet, the yellow notepad, and the cracked jar. She could have the couch, the cheap lamp, the TV she loved more than quiet. By the time I zipped the bag closed, the room looked oddly unfinished, as if my absence had already begun. At the door, I paused. She hadn't moved from the bed. Her face was turned away. I couldn't tell if she was crying or just waiting for me to falter. "I won't tell people what you did," I said. "I don't need to. You'll do it again with someone else, and eventually they'll figure it out like I did." She flinched. "That's not a threat," I added. "It's just a pattern." "I hate you," she said softly. I believed she thought that in the moment. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter. "I don't hate you," I replied, "but I won't love you like this." Outside, the hallway felt colder than usual. The air tasted like metal and dust. I closed the door gently behind me. On my way down the stairs, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Good. Just that. Nothing more. I typed back before I could overthink it. "Thank you." There was no reply. I didn't need one. The weeks that followed weren't cinematic. They were messy and practical. Calling the utility companies to separate names. Paying what I owed and refusing to cover what I didn't. Moving into the tiny studio above the cafe, paint peeling but rent cheaper, the bus route easier. Maria helped me carry boxes up the narrow stairs on her day off. When we set the cracked jar on the windowsill, she tapped the glass gently. "You gonna keep this?" she asked. "For now," I said. "You could buy a new one," she pointed out. "I could," I agreed, "but this one tells the whole story." She gave me a look, half knowing, half careful not to assume too much. "As long as the story keeps moving forward," she said. "It will," I said. And for once, I believed myself. The cafe felt different, too. Not because the work changed, but because I did. When customers snapped, I didn't swallow it like truth. When schedules shifted, I asked for what I needed without apologizing before I opened my mouth. Slowly, my coworkers stopped looking at me as the one who never said no and started seeing me as someone who had lines. One evening, after a long shift, I sat alone at the small table in my new place. The room was quiet, the city a distant hum. I laid out the green wallet, the yellow notepad, and the bus passes from the cracked jar. The notepad had a new page open. At the top, in my messiest handwriting, I'd written, "Savings." This time, there were numbers beneath it. They weren't big, they weren't impressive, but they were mine, untouched by anyone else's hands. I tucked the old, nearly full bus pass into the back of the wallet behind my current one, a relic but not a chain, proof that I had walked and could walk again in whatever direction I chose. For years, those objects had only reminded me of survival in scarcity, of making do so someone else wouldn't feel the discomfort of limits. Now, they were something else, not just records of what I'd endured, but tools I could use to build something that wasn't centered around someone else's comfort. Maybe there would be other relationships. Maybe there wouldn't. I was tired enough that the idea of being alone felt more like relief than failure. Either way, the next person wouldn't meet me as a woman willing to shrink for them. They would meet me as someone who knew, down to the last cent and the last step, what her life was worth. I closed the wallet, the clasp clicking shut with a small, satisfying sound, and let the quiet of the room settle around me, not as an emptiness, but as space. For the first time in a long time. It felt like I had room to breathe. If my old green wallet could talk, it would probably tell 100 stories of stretching every dollar for someone else, of being opened with anxious fingers and closed with a sigh. Tonight, when I hold it, it feels less like a symbol of scarcity and more like a reminder that I know exactly how to walk myself out of places that don't love me back. If any part of my story sounds familiar, I hope you'll at least pause and look at the things you've been clutching just to keep others comfortable, and maybe quietly start choosing yourself in those numbers too.